Okay, let's look at some basic principles of exercise. I think you all know how to exercise, but I think there's a few things that I can help you with to show you what the new research is showing and maybe some of the new trends. First off, we would ask the question, what's the best kind of exercise for us to do? And what that really is talking about is, well, I've had this discussion with a lot of faculty members where is it swimming, is it running, is it what's going to burn the most calories, what's going to be easiest on your joints, all of those kinds of things. And here's where I think optimal health is kind of cool, is that the best form of exercise is whatever you'll do. It doesn't do any good to have a piece of exercise equipment at home that nobody uses and just sits there and becomes a clothes hanger type thing for you. And so we want you to do whatever is good for you. And so if you love running, be a runner. If you love swimming, be a swimmer. We just need to make it work for you. Some people have knee injuries or back injuries. It doesn't mean you shouldn't exercise. It means we need to find an exercise that works well for you. Here are some areas we can discuss in discussion board that work for many people. And so I won't go into a lot of detail, but I want to highlight these in case you haven't thought about them. And then maybe you want to think about them and just kind of have this mindfulness of, oh yeah, I do like that, or oh, that is what irritates me. So many people, they need motivation. Other people can just take off and run all day long and nobody needs to motivate them. But other people need motivation. And there's a lot, and so we'll look at that. Others need accountability. Others need to understand why they're doing it. And when they have that intellectual congruence, then they're happy campers and want to keep exercising. Also, for many people, they just need to make a commitment that, hey, I'm going to have a healthy lifestyle, and that means I'm going to exercise regularly. That means it's going to take a priority. It means when you get up in the morning, you say, yeah, I have this class, and when am I going to exercise? It's not something that just fits in when it's convenient. When it comes to motivation, a few things to think about. Make it fun. That's why a lot of people like competition, even if it's just fun competition. They're thinking about the score. They're thinking about something else. A lot of people like music. Just something, it's a distraction. A lot of people like to go with a friend. This is actually one of the highest things in success rate of women is when they don't do it alone. I know there's some women that are great solo people, but for a lot of people, the social aspect makes it so it's fun and they don't think of it as exercise. They think about it as spending time with a friend. Books on tape it's an old school way. I used to love listening to things. Now what I do is I listen to podcasts, and there's a thing out there called Swell, and it's kind of like Pandora for podcasts. And after a while, they get to know what you like. And so to me, time goes much faster when I'm listening. When I'm in the weight room, I like music, but when I do stairs. They're just slow walking stairs, but it's like a run or a bike ride or something that's a little bit, for me, monotonous. And I can concentrate on the book. The podcasts are great. Invite a friend, invite a professor, make it fun. Make it the event. Instead of going out to lunch, go, hey, let's go for a walk. Hey, let's go play tennis. Something that you can do with someone else. Accountability works for a lot of people. Some people are fine with making their own diary and they don't want to miss a day on their calendar. Other people need to have that aspect of improvement to it. Like yesterday, I was at this resting heart rate, and I got my heart rate up to this. All of those kinds of things can make it accountable for you and make you keep on track. Having a training partner works for most people. One of the ways is when you're ready to quit or slow down, hopefully they won't be. And maybe you can do that for them. The other is, for schedules, if you put this in as an appointment, it says, oh no, I have to go, I'm meeting somebody at 2, you're going to show up. When it's just on yourself, you go, oh, I'll listen to them, and then time goes and you don't get in your workout. Personal trainers can really be helpful. I think that sometimes they're so expensive, but like even you, your parents, whatever, community colleges, you can take a class and learn a whole new exercise or skill for very little money. But it does help to have good knowledge. There are some good things online, and there's some quackery online too. But you know what? Most of it is very good that's on there. But knowing the right technique And then having some variety, have somebody that can, so you get out of the rut and give you new ideas on whether you're working on your cardio or your strength or whatever. Sometimes a financial commitment, people put something in a pot and they go out for a party or something at the end. That works for some. I want us to consider too the spiritual aspect of accountability. I know you would never hear this in a church or anything like that, but the idea that, you know what, God has given us this body, and I think he expects us to be stewards of it. And when we abuse it in whatever ways, I think you might hear it in the old days, you would hear it about alcohol or drugs or something like that. But maybe overeating is the same thing, when we abuse our body and we don't take care of it. You are accountable to me, and your grade has something to do with your fitness level, and so maybe that will motivate some of you. Just a quick hit on some of these kinds of things. Rick Warren's church has used their small covenant groups and turned them into support groups for exercise. And some people loved it, some people didn't. He brought in experts. Dr. Oz was one of them, and he slimmed down. He's back up. He had a tough year with the death of his son and those kinds of things. But isn't it interesting to see how it can fit into the spiritual life, and you can be a support and have those same kinds of relationships with other people and share. This lady up here, I believe, was really against it. She goes, I don't go to church to do this. And yet with the support group and her friends, she turned her eating around and started exercising, and it changed her whole life. His favorite quote is, the Father made your body. Jesus paid for your body. The Spirit lives in your body. You better take care of it. Okay, this part about making sense, this comes out of research from back in the olden days when the military would just yell at you and you'd go run. PE classes used to be that way too. They found that they had much better results when people understood why they were running and what the training was about and what they were trying to develop. And so this understanding and knowledge about health and fitness, and that's what optimal health might be for you. And so let me help you if you don't understand something. The idea too is, if you keep doing the same things, it's amazing how many people say, I have tried and I can't lose that last 10 pounds or whatever. Well, what are you doing differently? Nothing. Well, then why would you expect to lose that last 10 pounds? So we need to figure out some things and look at it intellectually sometimes. You know, of the 7 traits of successful people, one of those is begin with the end in mind. So think about this summer. What do you want to do? What is it going to take? What results do I want to have? And am I willing to pay that cost? And am I going to do that? So have a plan beforehand. Your tomorrow is purchased with what you do today. And that's your college life, you know, academically, the grades you get, the job you get. That's a lot of what the prep you're doing now. And the same thing with your body. If you take care of your body, it's going to be in better shape for you later. This lifestyle idea is that some people just cannot live back and forth. They want to hang on to one lifestyle, but I think for most people, and research has shown, that if they just make that commitment and decide, you know what, I'm going to be healthy, and so I'm not going to eat this kind of stuff. I'm not going to buy this kind of stuff. And sometimes it's hard with different people in your family, but most successful people don't do it half-heartedly. Dr. Dean Ornish is one of the few people that showed a reversal of heart disease, and he does it with people that already have a bad prognosis, so they're pretty motivated. But he turns them into vegans. And then they say, well, that's so severe. And he goes, you think eating plants is severe? I think cutting somebody's chest over and putting tubes in it, that's severe. Okay, now back to this idea of what kind of exercise. So we have 2 main groups, and that would be aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic means you can do it and you are breathing and your heart is beating at a tempo that you can supply enough oxygenated blood to your muscles to keep going indefinitely. So you're at a steady state. The steady state is the oxygen demands are being met by the heart and lungs. Anaerobic, you're going at a higher intensity than that. And you can't keep this going for a long period of time because there's not enough oxygen, and so you're going to build up some other things we'll look at here in a minute, lactic acid for one, and hydrogen ions that are going to make it impossible to keep going. But that's the kind of thing where it's interval training. You go hard, you recover. You go hard, you recover. And this continuum, and I know you probably can't see it here, but maybe you'll look this up later. Here's marathon. So this would be 100% aerobic on this side. And down here would be weight training. We're at 0% aerobic. And on the opposite side, it's 100% anaerobic and 0% up here. And what we have is in the middle here, you have the lactic acid type things. You're using more carbohydrates there. You're using more fat up here. Here, you're not using either one of those. You're using a little bit of sugar to replenish, but really you're using ATP and creatine phosphate that's actually in your muscles already. And so I want us to recognize this, that if you went out for a jog and you haven't jogged and all of a sudden you get out of breath, maybe it's not because, or you don't need to stop, maybe you just need to slow down and recover and then go again. So what we look at here is how much fuel and what kind of fuel is being used with what kind of exercise. So when you're at rest, primarily you're using fat as an energy source. So 65% of those calories burned at rest are fat, 35% are carbohydrates or blood sugar. And so that was the basis of exercise, 20, 30 years ago. And they thought you had to exercise for 20 or 30 minutes at this low, steady pace because you're burning more fat during it. That's absolutely true. But it's not what we really care about. Because even though we're able to do that, what we really care about is the total calories that we're going to use during exercise. As intensity increases, more energy is needed. So even though the percentage of the fat as a fuel source balances out with the carbs, more fat is used to meet the energy demand. So let me show you that in a graph. Here, low and slow. So let's say this is 50% is sugar, your blood sugar, and 50% is fat. That's fine, low and slow. Over here, your percentage is much more carbohydrates, but you still increase the number of fats or the number of calories of fats that you used here. So this is still good. Even though the percentage is down, your total calories are up, and that's what we want. So we don't teach, and I don't know too many people that teach low and slow anymore, just for health or for fat loss. If you think of The Biggest Loser, you never see them doing low and slow. Well, I don't say never. There are times when you put in just some time. But there's always this other part, too, with intervals. And that's what we're going to talk about a lot here. So that brings us to energy systems. And I don't know if you understand these, and I don't mean to overload you. You definitely understand the oxidative system. That's aerobic system. You probably have felt the lactic acid system when you get that burning in your muscles if you run up a hill or something like that. And the phosphagen energy system is a little bit different. It's very quick but very short duration. And I want to look at the advantages and disadvantages of all these systems. So as we look at the phosphagen energy system, and maybe you've heard of people that supplement with creatine phosphate, creatine monohydrate, those kinds of things. Creatine is in your muscles. And what it's able to do is when you used ATP and now you broke off a phosphagen, instead of ATP triphosphate, you have adenosine diphosphate. And this creatine phosphate will give its phosphate up, and that ADP turns back into ATP, and you're ready for more energy. So this is in the muscle. If you eat a lot of meat, you probably have enough creatine phosphate. If you don't, you might be low. Vegetarians, vegans, they could really use a supplement with this. It's one of the most popular supplements because it's effective. Now, there is a caveat, and that is that when you take creatine supplements, it seems to absorb water with it. And sometimes it draws it out of other places like muscles where you might end up, there's a theory that you might get a pulled muscle. All you have to do is make sure you're hydrated. So if you take creatine, then make sure you're well hydrated, and then it's safe and effective as a supplement. And it's going to be more effective with people that don't eat a lot of meat. If you eat a lot of meat, you're eating muscle, that's where you're going to get the creatine anyway. So how does it work? It's very fast. One molecular reaction, bam, you have ADP back to ATP, you're ready to go. Recovery is 1 to 3 minutes, but the downside of this is the capacity. It only lasts about 10 seconds. So something you go very hard for only can do for 10 seconds and you slow down. And that's because you ran out of creatine phosphate. And the lactic acid system, it's in between. It takes about 12 chemical reactions. You use glucose, and so it takes a little while. But this is like playing basketball or soccer with sprint recovery, those kinds of things. If it was in track, it would be like running 400 meters, once around the track very hard. You would feel a burn. That burn really isn't lactic acid. It's an accumulation of hydrogen ions, but that's a little more than this class needs to go into. The deal is, if you really get yourself full of this, then it's going to take longer to recover. So 1.5 hours or 15 minutes. So if you go hard and you recover, hard and recover, then it's easy to recover. But if you accumulate, then it's going to take longer to recover. Oxidase system, virtually no recovery time, but it takes a while to get going. And so when you first start jogging, you're using these other anaerobic systems, and then that kicks in, and you can run across the United States with your aerobic system if you just keep the fuel going in and that kind of stuff. So it's very slow to respond, and then after it does, it has virtually unlimited capacity. This is how we metabolize our proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and to use these. So I want to go through this, and I hope this makes sense with you. This is the energy pathways of all these. And so this is supposed to be a muscle cell. This is supposed to be a capillary bed around it. Here we have our creatine phosphate and our ATP that's going to be energy. When we use this, when we exercise, we break off a phosphagen, and that releases energy. And that's great, but now how do we replenish it? Creatine phosphate gives it back up, and now we have another ATP again, and we're ready to go. So that's very easy. You only have enough in your muscles for about 10 seconds. But when you take a supplement like creatine phosphate, it doesn't, or creatine monohydrate, or any of those kinds of things. What happens, and the people that want to do this are people like in the weight room, where they're lifting weights. It doesn't make you stronger. What it does is it allows you to recover so you're ready to lift again in between sets. And that's because of what we just saw there. It replenishes that ATP. In this section, this would be the beginning of the glycolytic pathway here. And so we'll just let some of those electrons work there. And what we care about is you can either have glucose coming in or stored glucose in the muscle cell of glycogen. And in this pathway, we're going to come through here and we're going to get these ATPs. Where here, you don't have many, so you're only going to last for 10 seconds. This is longer. It takes a little bit longer, and you have more of it, let's say 1 to 2 minutes. And then you have this as an end product, and we'll talk about that. What are we going to do with that? Well, one of the things we can do, that little thing down here, this is supposed to be a mitochondria. I know it looks like a banana leaf or something. And when this can go into the Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle or whatever you were taught to call it. And again, we need to look at how some of these electrons are transported down, and we get a lot of ATP. So here you saw one, here you get a few, and here you get just a gazillion ATP coming out of here. But there's a limiting factor here, and that is these hydrogen ions need to have oxygen to meet them. And if they do, you can just keep going. This is that steady state. You're jogging along, you have enough oxygen, and you're just a happy camper, and everything's good. You breathe out, or your body can absorb the water that it produces, or you can breathe it out as water vapor sometimes too. But what happens if you pick up the pace? Now you have too many hydrogen ions and not enough oxygen. This is when your heart rate's going faster and faster because you still can't pump enough oxygenated blood to those muscles. Well, they back up. And as they do that, you accumulate more hydrogen ions here. And now they're floating around in the cell. Well, what's kind of cool is this pyruvic acid can take these on. And so this pyruvate can absorb these hydrogen ions. So here what we have is I added these two hydrogens over here. That would be like these two being absorbed. And now you don't accumulate these. And so that's a really nice thing. And then as you see, as these arrows go back and forth, that also means that as you do your cool down, now these can go back through the Krebs cycle and be used as energy again. And so you can get rid of some of these accumulated hydrogen ions. And that's where that burning feeling comes, and some people think soreness too. But if you kept going and you did repeated 400 runs and repeated 400 runs, then these would accumulate so much they would actually leave the cell. This is where you just feel the burning in your leg. But if you keep going, now it's going to leave and it'll go out into your system. You could get sick and throw up. Some people do that after some track workouts. Or it can eventually go to your liver and be metabolized there some too. Okay, I hope that helps. All I want out of that is for you to realize that there's 3 energy systems, and when we exercise, we're actually going to try to use all 3 of those. So back to what kind of exercise? Well, we don't want to do things where you only use small, isolated muscle groups. If you're doing rehab or something like that, that's fine, but not for keeping your metabolism up or for trying to burn fat. What we want to do is we want to do full range of motion. We want to do large muscle groups. So I have some examples that will help us do that, and we want to use all the energy systems. This is called a VersaClimber. We don't have any at school anymore. We wore them out. But what this allows you to do is there's an upper and lower body component. And you'll see that at most fitness facilities now, they don't have too many just stair steppers. Treadmills are still popular, but the idea that you can use your upper body and your lower body, you're burning more calories. Okay? And so here, the other thing is, look at how high they're reaching. This step, getting this full range of motion in the upper body. This is really valuable. This is what makes these things the highest caloric burner of all the exercise machines. So again, you see her leg. What else do you do where you get this kind of range of motion? So what that means is she's also using her gluteal muscles, she's using her shoulder muscles, and when she pulls down, she could use her back, her latissimus dorsi. And that's why these guys are able to put out this kind of research. They burn so many calories. My point is, you don't have to get a VersaClimber, but try to use big muscle groups and large range of motions. Don't just go part way through something. That's why I like walking up the bleachers in the gym, because for me that's a pretty big step, and I get my gluteals involved as well as the quads. Again, you see this? So she's in a crouch position. This is a great situation. When you sprint, you're more in this position. When you jog, you're not at all. You hardly ever get that kind of range of motion. Now, we used to have these, and there was a situation where I had two girls over there, and they were just doing a little knee wiggle, okay? And they're talking, and they're having fun. And I said, well, just for an experiment, try to do it where your knee comes up to parallel. And then they did it, and they were just so, I go, slow down, slow down, slow down. And they go, I can't believe how hard it is. Well, they weren't using range of motion. You can knee wiggle all day long. So when you're walking and jogging slowly and you just have a little knee wiggle, you're not burning near as many calories as you could. That's why the aerobics and aerobic dance are so popular, because they try to get you going through full range of motion. You use a lot of muscle in there. There's some other ways to do it. He turned his arms around so that he's using his bicep and he can switch up the muscles, similar to what you would do in an aerobic dance class or something. They would change things up so that you can just hit and target. This is nice because of the rehab aspect. So you could still use upper body and this leg, and they're on a seat here and they're not supporting their leg. And so injured athletes or anybody could use this kind of thing. This is one where they changed it. Instead of alternating in a crawling position, it's together. But again, see the full range of motion? When people stop here, they don't get the glutes involved. And it's just a quadricep, and it's just not as many muscles, and it's not as many calories burned. So try for full range of motion in what you do. This is more of that cross crawl pattern or the standard pattern. And so here, see, they're both going opposite. Here, they're both up. Here, one's up, one's down. And so it's just a different way to do it. You can do this with a step aerobics or something like that as well. Okay, now you understand the importance of large muscle groups and full range of motion. So we're going to move on to using these multiple energy systems. What I'd really like you to do is not stay at a steady state. So if you like to jog and you were going to, let's use the track. Instead of just going around and around, what would be ideal would be the idea of intervals. So after you're warmed up, you come to a straightaway and you accelerate and you're going as fast as you can halfway through it. Now you decelerate, and now, let's say the first time you walk the corner, and then you accelerate the straightaway and you decelerate and you walk the corner, and then later you'll jog the corner. But those intervals are going to have a better effect on caloric burn and building your metabolism than slow and steady. Really, we don't do slow and steady anymore. Or long and slow is just not the way to go. What we want to do is have intervals. So in this example, we ask the question, which burns more calories, walking, jogging, or running a mile? And the deal is, there's no perfect answer, but all I want you to see here is that they measure how much oxygen is utilized and all that kind of thing. That you can be very efficient. And so what happens here is this is men and women and how many calories they burn running as opposed to walking. Now, why would that be? Well, they're going faster and it's harder, but they're doing it for a shorter amount of time. So wouldn't it all even up? You know, if it's a certain amount of work, you're carrying this many pounds this far, shouldn't it all be even? Well, theoretically. But what happens when we do this is that we're inefficient when we run, meaning there's gravity and we have to use our muscles in an eccentric contraction to catch ourselves as we lower that weight, where when you walk, you're really efficient. We don't want to be efficient, so efficient that we don't burn as many calories. And so it all has to do with efficiency. So sometimes doing something more in a more difficult situation really works out to burn more calories. In this, what happens is that there's times where if you're running so slowly, it's kind of like a horse in a trot, and it's awkward. You're not as efficient. See, walking fast is more efficient. Your heart rate is actually lower. This is beats per minute. So it's too slow. But then you hit that perfect time where it's just a nice, easy stride. Now you become more efficient. And so then when you're walking so fast that it's hard, now your heart rate goes up. And so it's that efficiency that we do want it, but we want to mess with it too. We want to do things that make it hard on our body at sometimes too. So just don't expect too much from a slow walk. New research doesn't mean that walking burns any fewer calories than it used to. It just means that walkers might have to walk a little more, eat a little less to hit their weight goal. And so if you're a beginner, that's fine. But eventually, even walk intervals. Walk as fast as you can to the end of the block. Now recover, walk slower the next block. But don't just do the same steady, slow, and only using one energy system. Here, we have 3 ways to create an overload. And this is just a reminder. You can change the frequency, the intensity, or the time. And what that means is, how often are you going to exercise? Once a week, twice a week, 5 times a week? So you increase the frequency of your exercise. The intensity is, instead of doing a mile, I kept the distance the same. In 10 minutes, now I do it in 8 minutes. I increased the intensity. Or I lifted more weights. Or something like that. Time has to do with, I used to go 15 minutes, now I'm up to 30 minutes, and so I'm building. All of these are ways to manipulate your exercise so that you're working harder. This is an example of a heart rate in interval training. So here's the heart rate went up, and this is a mile around the track. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so these little marks here are each lap, and it's a kind of a steady state. It's kind of a warm up, and then it was kind of slow and recover, and then sprint the straightaway, and then recover and sprint the straightaway, and et cetera for the next mile. And then this is the next week, where instead of just walking the corners, now jog the corners, and you can see how the heart rate's higher, and it's a little bit faster, and there's less recovery, and so it builds. But you used a lot more muscles in the range of motion